KMC,
HD3 Detroit,
KJAQ,
HD3 Seattle,
WBMX,
HD3 Boston, and on AOL Radio and Yahoo Launchpad. Psychic Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. New skyradio.com. Believe.
What's actually happening when you communicate with what we call a ghost? Can you actually help them? Can they actually help you? Can you, for example, prevent a suicide or other disaster that has already happened?
Well, hey there, and welcome to the 122nd edition of Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. I'm Ben, and those intriguing questions came from my co-host and partner in the paranormal, my dad.
Now, we have no guest today, and that's because, and I could be wrong, I don't know any paranormal researcher who has taken tonight's subject as far as we have, or in the way that we have. We're going to talk about cases of paranormal love and beauty that involve actual contact, sometimes physical contact, with people and other intelligent beings whom most people would call ghosts. That's because almost everyone assumes that all ghosts are spirits of one kind or another, remnants of dead people who are stuck on the earth or between the physical and spirit worlds or haven't crossed over correctly to the great beyond, whatever that means. Or the others, or the ones that are, I guess, non-human. People assume they're demons, servants of Satan or some other product of human theology. But after 40 years of dealing with ghosts, I don't see it that way. As a matter of fact, by the mid-1970s, I was already forming the opinion that none of the traditional explanations came close to explaining what I and those with me were experiencing. The ghosts as spirits thing wasn't good enough.
So you pretty much just took, like, all the centuries of paranormal research and decided it was all wrong?
Well, yeah, pretty much. Science and pseudoscience, Ben, both depend on the evidence of our five senses. You hear what sounds like a disembodied voice in the dark. You see a gauzy white or plasma-like figure floating across the dining room, and naturally you're going to think it's a spirit. What other explanation could there be? Again, not good enough. Now, there has been paranormal research for well over a century. The Fox sisters' experience of the 1840s, which started the spiritualist movement, was a prompt for people who were getting into the new science of psychology to look into this. And I ended up actually working with his wife at one point or another, Dr. Joseph Rhine from Duke University, and, of course, Louisa Rhine, whom I knew when I was just starting out in this in the late 70s, early 1980s. But they all were straining and sweating to make the paranormal research fit into the mold of the scientific method. And it has never worked, and it never will work, because this is outside of science, and our science isn't good enough.
It's so much Western thought, if you really think about it. Like, we have to organize everything. Everything has to make sense. Well,
very true. Well, now I'm happy to say that the things like transpersonal psychology are coming in, which is the study of spiritual experiences and this sort of thing. And there's a lot more open thinking now. And again, of course, with good old quantum physics and science of that kind that is going beyond what old science did, I think is really, really helping. But as you remember the show with the great physicist Fred Allen Wolf, when he said on this show, we tend to find what we look for. If we believe something long enough, the evidence we find tends to corroborate it. Of course, that means that we could be wrong too.
Yeah, so how does one find the truth?
Well, good enough or not, what we're left with is our own observation, coupled, and this is crucial, with the broadest possible perspective, open-minded thinking, and the most advanced, maybe even fringe scientific thinking, in this case, the multiple worlds theories of quantum physics that we use a lot in our work.
But what is the truth?
Well, I don't know. Well, all you can do is start doing what I think I've tried to do, and that's rely on your own observation to the best of your ability. Because it really does the truth comes down to what you have find it to be. I'm not saying it's relative. I mean, in a lot of cases, things are just what they are, And I think the best way to do that is to get rid of the assumptions. One of them that we just talked about is the assumption of scientific ability to define reality, which it can't. and just to come down to the experience of it. Okay, which I'll get into a couple cases of illustrating what I'm talking about here. Anyway, again, what we're left with is our own observation and the best possible thinking, open-mindedness, perspective that is broad, and that's very uncomfortable sometimes. But anyway, by the early 1980s, I hadn't quite arrived at that destination yet, but I was convinced that we were dealing not with spirits, but with both human and non-human creatures of infinite varieties, usually quite physical, going about their lives in parallel worlds that are usually, but not always, just out of reach to us. It's when they're not out of reach, when they intersect and interact, that things get interesting, or paranormal, as we call it. Right or wrong, that's what I've seen in my research over the last few decades, and it has opened up entirely new universes of possibility when it comes to our understanding of everything. God, the self, each other, the universe, history, the future. So for me, anyway, the paranormal has become not some quest to prove there's an afterlife. It's the beginning of a whole new discovery of what life really is. And the ultimate message I believe I've found is, and that you and I talk about at times, is one of hope and joy beyond anything we've previously understood those words to mean.
Isn't that what most psychics and mediums already say?
Well, I don't think so. With some exceptions, and you and I both know some exceptions. Most of them are married to the old spiritualist beliefs that I've described before. They look out over the ocean, as it were, and I don't know, instead of seeing a vast multiverse of unimagined worlds and life and forms we never dreamed of, they see the earth as flat and life as two-dimensional. They don't think. They regurgitate. And I resent the fact that they pretty much dominate this field and the public perception of it. So sure, they pass along warm and syrupy stories from loved ones in the so-called spirit world, but they're like low-level communications monitors at some government intelligence agency. They relay whatever comes in, not questioning the source, and having no idea of the full depth, meaning, or implications of what they might be passing on. The worst of them take advantage of other people's grief to extend control and to make money. I hate that.
So what have you seen?
Well, okay, and you've never heard of some of these cases before. We just never got into the subject of them. Some of the most memorable cases that turned my thinking in this direction had to do with the paranormal experiences of children, especially when they talk with their ancestors. And don't look now, but you were one of them.
Yeah, I know.
All right. Now, I think the closest you've come to this so far is the little boy in Donna's Connecticut farmhouse, a case we worked on for so long, who sees and hears things the rest of the family can't, and sometimes seems fascinated or delighted by it. But we're still working that case, and we're not entirely sure what it is yet. And we spend all too much time on this show talking about the dangers that lurk out there, parasites from other realities that feed on our energies, lying entities that pretend to be angels or loved ones. We won't talk about them today, if we can avoid it. There's far more good out there than there is evil. I have to believe that, and I've come to believe it.
Yeah, one thing we didn't mention in the beginning of the show is our call-in numbers, just in case. And you, right here on CBS New Sky Radio and newskyradio.com tonight are 248-545-SOUL. That's 248-545-7685. Or if you're listening on the computer, use that instant feedback feature to the right of your newskyradio.com homepage as you listen live.
Okay, well, probably the most dramatic child case I ever encountered was in 1991, and I have talked about this one on the air, but it is very beautiful, and I will repeat it as a good start to the cases we're going to talk about it, but I will be brief. That spring, 1991, I was called in by a Connecticut family, not because they were frightened, but because they wanted to share something marvelous that was happening with their 5-year-old son, Peter, who was dying of leukemia. It seemed he was getting a lot of support and advice from someone he had never known before, and Peter's mother told me that the boy was having long talks with her father, who had died 10 years before Peter was born. And she said, when we ask Peter about it, he gets excited, not embarrassed. And Peter was telling the whole family what she called happy things about his mother's early life that only her father would have known. And from the first of my several visits, Peter and I, they lived in Connecticut, Peter and I became great friends, and whenever I was there, he wouldn't leave my side. And we'd go for long walks by the nearby river, hand in hand. And this child was one of those special people whom it's a privilege to know. I think that's the way you are, Ben. One who was great-souled or old-souled, as the sayings go. And even though he was going through chemotherapy by that time, which is not a pleasant experience, he was one of the happiest children I'd ever met. His little body, which quickly deteriorated with this disease, contained what I could only feel was the spirit of an angel or a lion or a god. Such strength I can't describe in words. And as with nearly all children who have terminal illnesses, Peter was other-centered. He wasn't the selfish little ego machine that we so often associate with children. As with many who face bodily death, Peter saw things as they really are, without ego and without excuse. Peter had discovered the true spiritual secrets of the paranormal. He had discovered that his life, and yours, is a stupendous wave echoing across space and time and trillions of worlds, and that death, even bodily death, is the greatest illusion of all. And by discovering this little kid had found the true paradox of happiness by fulfilling himself, by forgetting himself. And there was nothing syrupy, sentimental, or maudlin about it like you hear from a lot of the psychics and mediums. He saw the big picture. He was happy, he said, because his family, especially his grandpa, loved him so much and had told him so many of these happy stories. One of these stories was about how big the world looks when you're little and how little it looks when you're big. And this is interesting. Quote, and this is from my old notes when I had seen him, Grandpa says he's younger now and he likes to climb trees because high up you can see more about the world. Interesting. The guy is dead in our world, but younger and climbing trees than this other one. Says you can be a lot of different people. You can be anybody you want to be as long as you're together. Now, that's an interesting way to put it, I think. Together with all your lives, maybe, across all these worlds, and you get bigger that way. I think that's kind of interesting. And asked in so many words if he was afraid of dying, Peter would say something like, I won't die. My body's not me. I look back on that and I see his beautiful face, and I get choked up about it. Anyway, we got to wrap. We'll be right back after the break. Stay tuned here, Behind the Paranormal, CBS New Sky Radio, newskyradio.com. Stay with us.
Psychic Radio. Para X with Dave and Tommy Jones on Psychic Radio.
This is Dave.
And this is Tom. And if you want to hear everything about paranormal, ghosts, spirits, UFO, you've got to tune into your radio show.
Don't guess. Tune in and you'll find out all about it. That's every Sunday, 8 until 10 p.m. Eastern on Parax Radio on Psychic Radio, powered by CBS.
Psychic Radio. PsychicOnAir.com. We know you're listening. Look for Psychic Radio on your AOL radio player.
Doctor, my eyes have seen the years and the slow parade of fears without crying. Now I want to understand. I have done all that I could to see the evil and the good without hiding. You must help me if you can. Doctor, my eyes. So long. As I have wandered through this world, as each moment has unfurled, I've been waiting to awaken from these dreams. People go just where they will. I never noticed them until I got this feeling. It's later than it seems. Doctor, my eyes, tell me what you see.
Psychic Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. New skyradio.com.
Okay, we are back, and we were talking about the case of little Peter in 1991, the boy who was like talking to the Dalai Lama, 5 years old, dying of leukemia, and his body passed surrounded by the love of his family the following year, in 1992. And I wish I could have been there. His mother described his passing, and these are her exact words, quote, like being present at the resurrection, unquote. Nobody cried. The room was filled with the deepest peace and power any of them had ever felt, she said. Now, that very day, Peter's great soul blossomed into a mighty guardian for them. And as long as I was in touch with his family, I heard stories of Peter's constant love, guidance, and protection for his loved ones. And again, he didn't die. He was in such an enlightened state already that his consciousness simply shifted to a place where he could be a great ancestral guardian. I can imagine no greater fate than that. And he even manifested himself in my life. He had truly, as he said, as a child, climbed higher and seen farther.
This is pretty trippy stuff. It's like we're getting beyond the paranormal.
Yeah,
behind the paranormal.
We're getting behind the paranormal. This is way beyond most forms of paranormal investigation. And I haven't written up most of these cases because it is behind or beyond most paranormal research. But thank heaven for that. I mean, that's where that's where this has to take you. We're getting into the realm of practical creature-to-creature interaction, or person-to-person, I should say, in the day-to-day multiverse. Some of these cases happened only to me. There were no other witnesses on this side of the world membrane, as they might put it. Anyway, I mean, I can't prove it, whatever that means. We're into the realm of simple compassion and basic human love. I've written about, as I say, very few of these because I'm a trained journalist and I can't report these as a journalist would. But I have no doubt that all that paranormal interactions like these are going on, they're going on, I think, all over the multiverse all the time. I think it's a normal part of our everyday life, which makes the paranormal anything but paranormal. It makes it normal.
There's our call-in numbers again for the day. And for CBS, New Sky Radio, and newskyradio.com. Our call-in numbers tonight are 248-545-7685. Again, it's 248-545-7685. Or if you're listening on the computer, use that nifty instant feedback feature on the right of your newskyradio.com homepage as you listen live.
Okay, well, another early case that, that wasn't an early case, but one early case that started to convince me of the physicality of the so-called other side took place in early 1975 at Ogdensburg State Hospital in upstate New York when I was studying for the priesthood at a nearby seminary. Now, ostensibly, I was working with other seminary students in the pastoral program at the hospital. What I was also doing was working at the hospital with a local priest who was also the diocesan exorcist, the guy they'd call upon one of the few who's educated in this, and one of the guys they'd call upon in the case of a problem that might have required exorcism, and this did happen at the hospital. Anyway, I was studying abnormal psychology, supposedly to be able to tell who was possessed and who was just plain nuts, and of course I quickly found out that it wasn't that simple. The state hospital wasn't exclusively for psychiatric patients. It sometimes served the local county as a regular hospital when needed. And it was in this capacity that little Martha, or Marty as we called her, was admitted. And it was one of the saddest situations I'd ever seen. Marty was 4 years old. She and her mom and dad had been in a traffic accident. Both parents had been killed. There were no other siblings, and hospital officials were trying to find the next of kin. Meanwhile, the child was suffering from multiple fractures and some internal bleeding that was inoperable. She was entirely conscious, but not expected to live. Naturally, she received lots of attention from the staff. Now, I drove over from the seminary more times that week than I usually would have, and we wouldn't be working with a patient like this. Usually it was with the psych patients, but she just drew people to her, little Marty did. But along with wanting to be in solidarity with her, I had begun to notice some odd happenings in her case. First, she never once asked where her parents were. Second, this 4-year-old kid. Second, she was astoundingly alert and normal, even though she was trussed up, in traction and everything and full of painkillers. Third, she seemed as though she was waiting for something. Now, when I gently asked her about her parents, Marty gave me a strange look. "They're here a lot," she said. And then that's all she'd said. And I was reading to her from Peter Rabbit, when she just drifted to sleep as I read. The next day, I had a shock that I've never forgotten. I had driven over to the hospital to see one of the psych patients and stopped in to see Marty. The hallway was oddly deserted, but just before I turned into Marty's doorway, I heard her giggle. Then, as I glanced into the room, before entering it, I froze in my tracks. The far half of the room was, and this is the only word I can use, shimmering. Now, it wasn't with light or anything, it was just shimmering, like heat rising from a road on a hot day. And there, stroking Marty's hair, was a female hand, just a hand, and wrist, also shimmering. Now, on the wrist, I could clearly see a silver bracelet. And as I stared, the hand withdrew and disappeared. The shimmer dissipated, and altogether, this whole thing took about 3 seconds, which can be a rather long time when you're having a paranormal experience. Now, again, there were no witnesses. I could have imagined it, but I know I didn't. That hand was as real and as physical as yours or mine. Was it Marty's mom? Well, why not? Okay, when I finally entered, Marty greeted me with the most angelic smile I've ever seen. That night, she passed away. I wasn't there, but the staff told me it was incredibly peaceful. Now, I've seen so many examples of people helping each other across the worlds, sometimes literally extending hands, as in Marty's case, especially relatives, that I always recommend ancestors as guardians, not only for families in general, but in cases of parasite attack. Because everything and every when, with all their possibilities, exist at once in the multiverse, I've sometimes run into what appeared to be descendants from what to us would be the future, helping their ancestors, us. All right, in our family, one of our guardians, and this can be difficult to talk about because it's so personal, one of our guardians is Ben's and Jonathan's older brother, Gregory, who in our conscious world was never born, but in many others, he was. And from at least one world, his love is aware of us and cares for us. I feel that he especially protects Ben. I don't know if you have anything to say about that.
I have no clue what's going on.
Well, you were very, very
young. So
yeah, and
well, that would explain why I'm not dead.
Yeah, well, that's true.
I felt I should have died so many times. Like, you know how you get that feeling like, oh, wow, I don't get why I didn't die. I was...
Well, that leads into an interesting question on its own. Because, actually, the death experience, we are having it in other lives all over the multiverse that are part of our subconscious, in my opinion. But the way you just described it is interesting.
What? I just felt I should have died so many times, but I never did.
Yeah, well, I look at some of the misadventures I've had. In the military and everything else, I suppose you could say the same thing. But I don't know. Again, it's the first day of school, but I do feel that Gregory, who was never born, it's funny. A lot of people will see Mom and me for the first time, and they'll get the feeling we have 3 children. And I say, well, actually, we have 2, but we don't. We have 3. Anyway, here's another interesting case that I think illustrates what we're talking about. I can get it started. We'll probably come up on a break. But in June of 2004, I was at a conference in Clearwater, Florida. That was about a year before you started. And remember, I go to all these conferences and stuff. I would use that time very, very valuably, I would think, looking into some cases while I was in wherever I happened to be. So this was a conference in Clearwater, Florida. And ended up with a fascinating case of cross-world friendship, I could only describe it as. Now, a staffer at where I was staying and presenting a program, the huge and historic Bellevue Biltmore Hotel, approached me and said that weird things were happening to her 11-year-old nephew, who could predict all sorts of things about the future, because of a companion nobody else could see, but that other members of the family could at times hear. Now, I'm always very suspicious of, these, quote, invisible friends who all too often turn out to be parasites setting up their human dupes, even if they're kids, to be hot lunches. And that especially is true when I run into older children who still have these invisible friends. By the way, this is this trip where everybody thought I was Steven Spielberg.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I'll give to that some other time. It was a riot. Well, anyway, okay, we got a little time. Young Tony's kid's name was Tony. This case turned out to be somewhat different from these things that I'm very suspicious about. In the one visit to his home I had time for that trip, I found him, to my surprise, to be a delightful, outgoing, straightforward boy who seemed more interested in my background as a journalist than he was in the paranormal. He was interested in baseball and had a number of friends, and he said he wanted to be a reporter someday. Now, what's interesting is that a lot of kids who have these invisible friends tend to be very introverted. They're turned in on themselves. They don't have a lot of friends. They have very their lives are very, very sort of wrapped up in their own imaginations, and psychologists make much of this. But this kid was just the opposite. He said he wanted to be a reporter. Now, what he reported to me that day was most interesting. The invisible friend, whose name also was Tony, was entirely visible to the boy. Now, except for the fact that he usually would arrive by walking into the room through the wall, he was a great deal like Tony's other friends, except for a few biographical details. Now, according to our Tony, the paranormal Tony was, quote, a relative, unquote, who was to be born on March 5th, 2093, 100 years to the day after our Tony's birth. He also lived in Florida, which in his world was part of a rather benign empire that included the entire coast of North America all the way up to Labrador, Canada. His father and mother were cattle farmers, and his Florida seemed to be a great deal more rural than ours. And he was crazy about baseball. I guess I still had baseball. The world can't be all bad. Yeah. Which in his world had slightly different rules. And people there could do visits. Now, I picked up on this right away because 2004, I already had long believed what I believe today. And I heard this idea of visits, and I said, wow, visits to where or when? Doing like Tony does, having friends in other conscious worlds. I mean, they're more aware of this and of their lives, and it's accepted as it is not accepted. And this was really cool. So anyway, our Tony seemed convinced that the paranormal Tony had saved his life on several occasions, including pushing him out of the path of an oncoming car and waking him up in time to put out a grass fire while he was out camping with his other friends, a fire that would have done damage to their equipment, if not them personally. So I spent a fascinating hour with Tony, maybe both Tonys, because I felt the overwhelming presence of another boy from the moment I walked into that room. And before Tony had told me anything about this friend of his, it was a feeling of someone very human, very positive, and even good-natured. Well, we'll continue this in just a moment. Stay with us on Behind the Paranormal as we talk about paranormal love and beauty. See you in a minute.
Psychic Radio. 24 hours a day. Reach out from beyond to your ears. On the web now. Log on to psychiconair.com. Your spiritual well-being is our concern. This is Psychic Radio. Powered online by AOL at psychiconair.com.
We know you're listening.
Tried to beat you, but you're so hot that I melted. I fell right through the cracks. Now I'm trying to get back. Before the cool done run out, I'll be giving it my bestest, and nothing's gonna stop me but divine intervention. I reckon it's again my turn to win some or learn some, but I won't hesitate no more, no more. It cannot wait. I'm yours. right to be loved, 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 loved. So I won't hesitate no more, no more. It cannot wait. I'm sure there's no need to complicate. Our time is short. This is our fate. I'm yours. Do you, but do you want to come on? I scooch on over closer, dear, and I will nibble your ear. Spending way too long checking my tongue in the mirror and bending over backwards just to try to see it clearer, but my breath fogged up the glass, and so I drew a new face and I laughed. I guess what I'll be saying is there ain't no better reason to rid yourself of vanities and just go with the seasons. It's what we aim to do. Our name is our virtue, but I won't hesitate no more, no more. It cannot wait. I'm yours.
Acclaimed sound healer, author, and radio host Mark Pattison brings you a weekly inspirational message with your 11-minute miracle, followed by the best medium psychics and best-selling self-help authors. Join us for the best new thought program out there. It's called Dynamic Transformations with Mark Patterson. It's Monday from 9 to 10 Eastern, exclusively on CBS Radio's PsychicOnAir.com, powered by CBS.
Psychic Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. New skyradio.com. Believe.
Okay, Ben and I are back right now talking about paranormal love and beauty, cases you don't usually hear about, but they can, I don't know, they lift me up and they make me feel better about a lot of things. This is a case of Tony, a young 11-year-old boy in Florida in 2004, and what I learned from my meeting with him. And I think what we had here was a friendship across parallel worlds. This kid born in 2093, so he claimed, invisible friend of Tony's, not so invisible to the family sometimes, in the form of they'd hear his voice now and then. And he was in that room before Tony told me anything about him. I could feel him in that room. You know, again, it was very, very obvious. So maybe this could have been a descendant of our Tony's from a world in which it's possible to access other worlds and to be with your loved ones in ways that we don't understand or that we don't know about. And it's funny, Tony told me something very interesting. He said, I think there's some stuff he, meaning the paranormal Tony, wouldn't tell me because it might freak me out. Well, Ben, I suppose that if you were 11 and talking to your own great-great-grandson or something, you might find it kind of freaky. You know?
Yeah, well, I don't know.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, maybe you wouldn't because you're used to this stuff.
Yeah.
Now, it makes you wonder, too, on the level of the psychological and psychiatric, how many youngsters are shuffled off to psychiatric facilities or put on pills or put on, counseling.
Oh, yeah.
When they experience something like this that might just very well be real.
Yeah, no, pills just make things worse. I don't get why everyone's like, let's put them on pills. They're just crazy. And it's like, no, they're probably just enlightened, man.
Yeah, well put. I mean, and it's just, there's got to be some way to tell. And how many of these experience that could uplift the whole human race if we knew about these possibilities?
Well, people are afraid of what they don't understand.
Oh, boy, that's for sure. It's been said before, but it's never been truer.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, once again, I have no real evidence for this, no ghost photographs, no electronic voice phenomena. And as a matter of fact, I deliberately left my cameras and stuff at the hotel. Sometimes things like that get in the way, like standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon and completely missing the view because you're texting about the visit to somebody back east. Sometimes you have to just let it go. You have to just let it go and have the experience. If you don't, you'll miss the sheer humanity of the whole thing, and you'll learn and probably prove absolutely nothing. But because much as we might want it to be, the paranormal doesn't exist on our terms. Just the opposite is true. We have a call from Linda in Illinois, and she said that, someone asked her to call in about an experience she's had. Linda, you're on Behind the Paranormal. Welcome to the show.
Why, thank you. How are you?
Pretty well, thank you. What's your experience?
Well, Dave Marsh came here. We had actually, back in October, I had a bunch of people from Blue Island. I had wrote about different experiences in the house of different visions of people that I had saw around here. And the psychic was here, and she wanted Dave Marsh to come here. Well, he came, and, at first I was like, I don't know what's going to happen, left and right. We were in our bedroom, and we saw the two little black boys that I had saw myself, and I thought, okay, now other people saw them. But the main thing was, we were in our dining room. We moved to my dining room, and I had about 10 of my friends and about 4 other people from town here, and we were doing seeing if anybody's present. I had a tree here in my dining room that we asked to show, and whoever was present shook a leaf. Then I saw a candle moving. Then as we got talking to the person, Dave asked, why are you here? And they said, for Linda. They asked me to move closer to the table, the spirit. When I moved closer to the table, they asked the name of the person. And the spirit said, Dorothy. My mother died 47 years ago, and my mother's name was Dorothy. And I stood there in shock like everybody else, not expecting this to happen whatsoever. And she had said that, in yes or no, that she was watching over me, watching over my family and that. And that night, I never, ever, in 47 years, expected ever to hear my mother. She never went into the light. She said she didn't go, and we thought maybe because she was trying to keep an eye on me and that. I was like the middle child, the one that didn't really have other people looking after. But after that experience, that night, I feel like my whole world changed. Like finally, she was here, and now I'm at peace. And I had to let her know I was at peace.
That's really beautiful. Now, again, I might describe it in different terms. I might describe the reality as different, but the point is that it's love.
Yes.
And love is that's the bottom line. Now, regardless of how you explain it, whether the spiritualists are right or whether we're right with our physics approach, it doesn't make any difference. I think what's really important to realize is that it really does, I guess, have to come down to your heart. And I'm sure you'd agree. Whether you realize that this really is who it says it is. Rather than some entity trying to, and you seem to have been so touched by this that, how can one question the goodness of it?
Well, it's so funny because, like I said, 47 years ago, I was 3 years old when my mother died. And my whole life she died in a tragic accident. I've moved all over the country and that. I always felt like I had somebody on my shoulder and really didn't know where it was coming from. I've talked to her that. But that night, and everybody in that room, we had non-believers here. And to be honest with you, when we started in the bedroom, as far as seeing, who I saw in that, I was like, whoa, what's all this stuff in that, And I was a little non-believer. And what happened in that dining room? And it happened that I was standing in front of my china cabinet of dishes that was my mother's. And it was just, my son lived across the street, and I said, I wish you were here to see this, because I honestly felt that I found a spirit there that I knew was there and felt the presence.
That's excellent.
And we had people around us, and we asked for things to shake something to show the presence. And I looked and I go, the candle's moving. The candle. And I have this candle that's hanging on a tree. We have no heater ducts around it, nothing. And everything moved on there. But it was... Okay. It was like I couldn't describe it.
Well, that's excellent, Linda. Linda, I want to thank you for your call. We got a couple of other callers lined up, and many blessings to you. Thank you for calling in. Right. Okay, we've got two of our show reporters on. I wonder if we can put them on at the same time. Dave Marsh and Kyle Dayton. Dave from Indiana and Kyle from Arizona. How are you doing tonight?
Hi, Paul
Good.
and
How are
Deb,
you?
And Dave, how are you today?
Good. Paul, I just want to elaborate a little bit on Linda's story. When they asked me to come in there, I went in just strictly on an investigation, take some photos, some EVPs, and see what I got. By the time the night progressed, we were getting, so many direct signs that we were asking to get. And I even had set up a ghost box with the frequencies. And we're
going to talk about that sometime.
Yeah, but but we were getting direct answers, and it's one of those situations like we've discussed on a previous show, and like you said tonight, it was just a moment where we just had to rely on our own observations, and I had a decision to make on whether to pursue this or just back off, and there was so much love coming from this situation, and I could feel there was so much help going Linda's way. That I'm not a guy that does cleansing.
That's great. I'm afraid we just hold that thought. We got to take a break. But Dave and Kyle, please stay on the line. We'll be right back on Behind the Paranormal.
Join Mystic Radio with Rob and Alexis Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern and 12 noon Pacific for your free on-air readings right here on the Sky. Founder of Metaphysical Mothering, Robin will answer your metaphysical questions, and she'll channel such spirits as Michael Jackson and Mary Magdalene. Listen and call in Wednesdays, 3 p.m. Eastern Time and noon Pacific for your free on-air readings right here on the Sky. And check out Robin's Soul Spa at robinalexis.com.
On my face hasn't stopped raining for days. My world is a flood. Slowly I become one with the mud. But if I can't swim after 40 days and my mind is crushed by the crashing waves that me up so high that I cannot fall, let me alone. When I'm falling, lift me up, and we can die. Lift me up, I need you to hold me. Lift me up, and keep me from drowning again. Downpour on my shores, splashing in the ocean. I'm losing control. Dark sky all around. Can't feel my feet touching the ground. But if I can't swim after 40 days and my mind is crushed by the crashing waves that me up so high that I cannot fall, lift me alone. Lift me up when I'm dry, the stream still flowing, casting down our ways and sin and guilt that overthrow me. If I can't swim after 40 days and my mind is crushed by the crashing waves that me up so high that I cannot fall, let me alone. Lift me up when I'm falling, lift me up, and we can die again. Lift me up, I need you to
Psychic Radio is now CBS Radio's The Sky. Back to Behind the Paranormal with Paul and Ben Eno. Call now 248-545-SOUL. New skyradio.com.
We are back, and we've been talking with a number of people. At least anyway, with David here, two of our reporters, about the paranormal love and beauty in cases in which you just, as David, as you just said, you just kind of back off and just have the experience,
Yeah, and when I called Linda a couple days later, when I finished that night and then the next day, I naturally had some second thoughts. Did I do the right thing? Did I get into something too personal? But when I talked to her and she told me how she had just felt like her life had turned around and that she hadn't been so alive and happy in so many years, then that was good enough for me.
Beautiful.
I just didn't even question it from that point on.
Well done. And Kyle, what do you got for us?
Oh, hi, Paul and Ben and David. It's good to talk to you. I wanted to add a couple comments about the children that have that are dying, and they seem to have a maturity and perception and wisdom around them. What came to mind was a little boy named Matty Stepanek. He passed away in 2004 at the age of 13 from a rare form of muscular dystrophy. Well, he became famous at the time. He was featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show, and he had written several books of poetry. His first book was called Heart Songs. I guess he sold millions of copies altogether, and in an interview he described this inner voice as a heart song, and he said, "It's our inner beauty, our message, the songs in our hearts. My life mission is to spread peace to the world." And this is a little boy that spent his time in a wheelchair and was kept alive with a breathing tube, a ventilator, and he had numerous blood transfusions. But he seemed to, when I saw him on Oprah Show, I was just moved to tears by just the maturity and the seeming like what you would call an old soul for someone so young. And they do have a sense about them that they have more wisdom, I think, in some ways as a lot of adults do. And
tell me about it.
Yeah, they do.
Ben and I talk about that all the time.
Yes.
Well, that's.
Go ahead.
It's true. No, go ahead. It's just beautiful. I mean, in the sense that it cuts to the chase. It cuts to the bone of what life is, in my opinion. Or should be.
And,
okay. Well, thank you both very much. We're kind of coming down to the wire here, I'm sorry to say, but this will be continued. We're going to do other shows on this.
Yeah, sorry to rush you.
Yeah, sorry to rush you. Just you know how it is.
But
thanks.
I have to applaud you both, though, for this show. This is the side of the paranormal that does not get enough attention, so thank you.
Exactly. Well, thank you. No, it's true. We believe exactly the same thing. Okay. Well, there is one thing I wanted to just get to before we had to go, and this is another case that occurred. This is 3 years later after the Tony case in May of 2007. I was back at the Bellevue Biltmore in Clearwater to speak at another conference. Now, it's in a hotel full of feral ghost hunters that weekend. I like to think that I prevented or helped prevent a suicide by a total stranger at some point in our past or future. I never caught his name, but the guy from a parallel world who seemed to be sharing my hotel room became apparent as soon as I arrived. Now, again, I don't look at this as some kind of psychic or mediumistic exercise or whatever. I've had these encounters. It's just linking up with another physical person sharing the same space as we are. That's how I look at it. But the five physical senses are pretty much irrelevant in these cases. You don't have to be Sylvia Browne to tell when there's somebody else in the room with you. Now, this Bellevue Biltmore is one of the oldest hotels in America. As a matter of fact, I believe it's the largest occupied wooden building in the country. Supposedly, it's very haunted. And I very rarely myself picked up anything there except in one particular room and this experience that I'm about to describe. Well, anyway, back to my 2007 roommate here, I immediately felt this fellow was a human in distress. Terrible feelings of depression and pain in this room. It was a middle-aged man, extremely depressed and lonely, and it didn't take long to conclude that he had checked into the hotel to decide whether or not to commit suicide. He seemed only vaguely aware of me and understandably unnerved by my presence, and to him, I was the ghost, from our point of view. Now, while I nearly always advise people not to try and deliberately communicate with any entity in most cases, I sometimes do so through meditation. believe it or not, Ben. And when I am certain of what I'm dealing with, and if I can feel I can do something to help, and again, if I'm certain this is not some kind of parasite or some other thing that's dangerous. The first thing I did was to convey as strongly as I could a sense of love and compassion. Gradually, I believe that he came to understand that whoever or whatever I was trying to help. And without words, that's important to understand, I came to see that this man had given up. He had a drinking problem, was overwhelmingly guilty about it. His wife had given up on him, and she herself was unfaithful. His 2 teenage children hated him, or so he thought. Couldn't get worse. He wanted to know if I was an angel. And I conveyed, no, just a friend. The fact that a total stranger would care, even if he was confused and a little frightened by the circumstances, seemed to do more than anything else to nudge him out of total despair. And then I took the next step, something I always hesitate to do because it can be a terrifying experience. I searched and found where and when in the multiverse that I was this man. You see, all life is one across the infinite worlds of this multiverse, and like an unending electrical cord, there may be many individual light bulbs or other gadgets attached, but it's a single river of energy that powers them all, and each individual is just a unique expression of that power. So what happened next was why I hesitate to take the step of momentarily becoming somebody else who's also me already. I felt his terror in total, his depths of fear, his sorrow, and his complete despair, and his desperate hunt for a way out. I shook violently and bent over onto the bed, sobbing. I felt him with me, feeling the same things. And just to make a long story short, I just sent to him the words, "We love you," speaking for you and me and all of us. A warmth descended on the room, and I really feel like something clicked with him. I think he got the message, and I think he had a high mountain to climb, but I believe that this spiritual experience at the dear old Bellevue gave him tools to begin. There's no more time to say anything more about it, but I think that it really, really worked. Anyway, we're out of time, and we got to close here. So, again, plan to listen to our 3-hour special, April 11th, New Sky Radio here on CBS, and we'll combine shows with our neighbors, Dave and Tom Jones of CAPS Paranormal, to host a UFO panel to discuss the 30th anniversary of the Bentwaters Air Base incident of 1980. And we're going to have all the big names here, most of them anyway, Bill Burns, and 3 of the witnesses, hopefully Colonel Halt himself. And anyway, keep posted on what we're doing, guests, past guests, what we got coming up, special stuff, behindtheparanormal.com. Check it out. You can also buy my books. You hear that? Buy my books. Subscribe to our newsletter or become a reporter, such as 2 of the great folks you heard tonight who called in.
And all our podcasts are available at newskyradio.com or at our show website, behindtheparanormal.com.
Thanks to our producer, Will Kosnick. We'll see you right here next Sunday, March 28th, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific. CBS New Sky Radio, newskyradio.com, when Ben and I will welcome our old friend Stanton T. Friedman, known as the father or grandfather of ufology, as he debunks the UFO debunkers, debunking the debunkers. That's what we'll be talking about.
And next week is that time of the month again. It's the 3-show marathon.
Time for us to sweat.
Yep. Our Saturday show at 11 a.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific on WON 1240 a.m. on Southeastern New England at onworldwide.com. You can also hear all our rebroadcasts of Behind the Paranormal on our Saturday shows at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 Pacific, right here on CBS Psychic Radio.
Don't worry about Ben. I get tired just thinking about that 4 hours of scripts I got to write for next week.
Oh, dear God.
Yeah, anyway. So we leave you with a quote from dear old Winnie the Pooh, otherwise known as author A.A. Milne. If you live to be 100, I hope I live to be 100 minus 1 day, so I never have to live without you.
Aw, sweet. And we'll see you next week.
Take care. See you then.